Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the 2025 State of the CIO survey results. It's actually the 24th year that we've done the State of the CIO survey, and it's wonderful to have this opportunity for this exclusive discussion, which is presented by CIO.com and the IDC CIO Executive Council. I'm really happy today to be joined by my colleague, Zach Miller, who is Executive Director of the IDC CIO Executive Council, as well as two CEC member panelists, Devin Valencia, who's CIO at CareSource, and Satya Jayadev, who's VP and CIO at Skyworks Solutions. So I want to hear a little bit from each of them to tell us a little bit about what they do and their background. So why don't we start with you, Zach?
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here today. As John mentioned, I work with the CIO Executive Council. Have the opportunity to work with folks like Devin and Satya and CIOs from across the United States and Canada, and bring them together to be able to share best practices with one another, as well as work closely with our IDC analysts here in the US, and really enjoy the opportunity I have to hear about all the innovation that's occurring across the companies that we work with.
Yeah, it's a great position, enviable position. Satya, tell us about yourself. This is the Jeopardy part. We say, tell us about yourself.
Nice to meet you all. I'm Satya Jayadev. I'm the CIO for Skyworks Solutions. Skyworks is a high-performance analog semiconductor organization. Whenever you hear about wireless connectivity or 5G, we probably have a product in there. So we operate in many different industries. Our products are powering the wireless revolution, as we call it. It is in the aerospace, in the handset industry, in the infrastructure, all the way to the wearables market. Wherever you see 5G or wireless connectivity, we have a product in there.
Very good. Thanks, Satya. And Devin, first, congratulations. Devin's in Dayton, Ohio State University, national champions in the Buckeyes in the first 12-game playoffs. That's quite a thing. So, Devin, tell us about your role.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for having me. Similar to Satya, I'm the Chief Information Officer at CareSource. So CareSource is a $13 billion managed care organization. So what does that mean? That means we do health insurance, and we are located in Dayton, Ohio. We are fast growing. I joined CareSource about 5 years ago, going on 6. We were in 4 states when I joined. We're now in 14, and so fast growing. And we serve predominantly government business, meaning healthcare coverage that comes from state agencies and CMS, so Medicaid, Medicare, marketplace plans, and then veterans, families, and such. So I'm excited to be here and appreciate the CEC and all the research you all do to help us do our jobs.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Devin. So before we go into the questions for the panelists, I'm going to be walking you through a few slides from the survey. Really, this is just to get you acquainted with it if you've not had any experience with the State of the CIO survey. It's a big survey. It's over 1,000 respondents, heads of IT. Most of them have the CIO title, but there are a variety of other titles in there as well. The whole goal behind this research is to focus on how the role is changing. What are the priorities for CIOs today? What are some of the challenges they're facing? And some of the technology projects and initiatives that are underway. And we'll be talking about those things as we go throughout our presentation today. One of the nice things is we're always asking in our surveys at Foundry about, at CIO.com, about budgets. So over the next 12 months, what's your expectation? And the good news in this research, as well as most of the research that we're seeing recently, is budgets are going to be going up in the next 12 months, so that we can see that almost 2/3 of the respondents said they expect their IT budget to increase in the next 12 months. And we asked folks why. What's driving those budget increases? And I won't go through all of that. I know that CEC members will be getting the full research results. But what I wanted to point out here is the number one answer is additional investments in AI and machine learning and AI-enriched products and services. So both internal AI initiatives as well as technology that's being acquired that's AI enriched. So that really is the first area where I wanted to spend a little bit of time focusing on with the three of you. I'd love to hear, and Devin, let's start with you on this. What is your current approach to AI? I mean, we're hearing so much about it. Your organization has had a fair amount of experience with it, I know. But what's the current approach? What are you hoping to achieve, and what kind of lessons have you learned along the way?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So AI is obviously top of mind for everybody, for everyone's C-suite, for every organization, certainly our board of directors. I think for us in technology, AI has been around for a very long time. My organization, lots of organizations have been working with some version of AI, whether it's bots or modeling or all sorts of things for years and years. I think what we're seeing is two things. One, it's consumer oriented now, so that average person can touch AI with generative AI and ChatGPT as an example. And so you're seeing it more in the news. But I actually think we're at a pivot point here, and we're having a lot of conversations with our board of directors and our C-suite that we're kind of at a pivot point in like the mid 90s around e-commerce and the internet and things like that. And there are parts of our industries, ways we'll work, ways the universe will work that we probably can't even imagine right now. So our approach to AI is it's here to stay. It's not going away. It's like saying, hey, can you put the calculator back and change math to an advocate? It's just never going to go away.
Yeah. So
we have to, especially in an industry like healthcare, we have to embrace it and know how to use it, or else our competitors will beat us to it. I do think there's a lot of caution, though, about how it's used. And I think so there's just a lot of learning. So we're aggressively using it. We use it extensively already, particularly in our data and analytics and things like that, and also member-facing activities. But we are being thoughtful, particularly when we're touching clinical outcomes and patients and providers and such, how we're very cautious about. We just don't let that go by itself, right? So there's a lot of human in the loop is what we really focus on.
Makes a lot of sense. And Devin, if you were to say in one sentence, what's the most important thing you've learned about AI so far?
The most important, it's not going away. It's not a temporary thing.
Right.
It will be a pervasive part of how we work. And so it's going to be embedded in everything we do.
Yeah, a generational shift in the technology. Yeah. Satya, what are your plans? What are your learnings? What's your take on AI at this point?
Yeah, so I think we've gone through that hype cycle, and now we are into a good space where we are trying to understand our use cases better. In the advent of AI, every nail looked like an AI nail because we had an AI hammer. But now we are starting to kind of sift all of that, and we're trying to understand what's a good use case for how we want to manage this. And I think when we talk about AI, we have to start talking about data. And when you talk about data, you talk about the systems of record, systems of transactions. What generates that data for you to start thinking about AI in totality in terms of what you're trying to do? So I think from that perspective, we are now peeling the onion, and we are looking at the different layers of what constitutes that. So, which is in line with what you had actually mentioned about when you spoke about IT budgets, why are they increasing, right? So the reason why we're increasing is because AI, being the catalyst, is driving that single source of truth when it comes to data. And that single source of truth is also trying to modernize our systems, bring in more optimization, bring in those systems of records or transactions that are generating that. So it is operations, modernizations, and the transformation that is all driving the cost up to make sure that we deliver AI at where the organization feels it and sees it from that perspective. So I agree, and I think Devin hit some great points as well in terms of AI is not going away. It's going to be here. There's a lot of investments coming through, and we're going to start seeing that in the next few years.
That makes sense. I also want to ask, if 2024 was the year of AI hype and sky-high promises and lots of promotions and projections around that, what's your expectation of how 2025 will be remembered when it comes to AI? And actually, I want to start with you, Zach. We were chatting about this earlier. When you think and talk across the CEC, what do you think 2025 will be remembered for?
Yeah, what we hear from members is that 2025 is the year of AI investment, and in some cases, as Satya referenced, it's the investment in preparing for AI, and that investment comes in large part around data strategy and data governance and cleaning up of tech debt. So really, it is about AI investment. And the other thing we hear from the members is that as they look at 2025, where there was a great deal of experimentation in 2024, they're now looking for use cases that have the greatest chance of success and business impact in their organization.
That makes sense. And Satya, what would you predict 2025 will be known for AI, the year of?
I think we initially, when AI came to the fore, right, we had a venture capitalist mindset to say, let's put on 8 to 9 use cases. Let's see where we are. Let's do some discovery. So we had some investments coming through. So a lot of the learning is now starting to crystallize. And now from VC's mindset, we're going to go into an ROI mindset. Give me those use cases that is now coming to like fruition. How is the company benefiting from that? The board is looking at that. The senior executives are looking at that. The feeling for what AI can do, whether it's a hype cycle or whether it is true, and all of that is now pretty much crystallized, and we know what we can do with it. We know where we are with that, and I think this is going to be the year when you're going to see some organizations drive that ROI towards the finish line, and that's what's going to happen, I believe, in 2025.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I hear about that ROI issue from a lot of CIOs. It's been difficult in many cases to model that in advance of a pilot, and it's difficult afterwards to determine success. So it's a great topic to bring up. Devin, what will it be known 2025, the year of?
Yeah, I think I think you're going to see some companies, because they've made the right plays, both in their data platforms and in their engineering talent and their data science talent, they're going to pull away from the competition at a pace I think that's a little bit going to be unexpected. I worry a little bit that some companies that aren't totally prepared, they're going to be a little bit lagging. So actually, it's kind of the separation of the wheat from the chaff. I think you're going to see a huge acceleration in companies and spaces. And actually, I think you're going to start to see things like in mid-90s, there's like 1,000 new companies that are on the S&P that didn't even exist in the mid-90s. So I think there's whole new companies, operating models, the emergence of ways of working that I couldn't even explain what they are now. But I do think you're going to see a differentiation. I think some companies are really going to take off very quickly because they have the right building blocks in place. And I think others are just going to try to be catching up a little bit.
You know, it's interesting. We have a survey called AI Priorities. It looks exclusively at AI. And one of the questions is, do you think your organization is moving too quickly or too slowly when it comes to AI? It's really split. I mean, it's almost an even split. But one person remarked that I think for the people who think they're moving too quickly, they're one press release from a competitor away from realizing they're not moving anywhere fast enough when it comes to AI. So I wanted to note there's this slide from the State of the CIO survey, where it says 75% of CIOs are working more closely with line of business on AI applications, and 71% agree that it's the IT department that's driving AI adoption efforts and aligning with business units on that. So we're going to talk more about the role, but I wanted specifically to ask, and I'll start with you, Devin, how is this focus and this urgency around AI, how is that alone changing the CIO role today?
Yeah, I think you're moving to much more of a strategist role. I think because again, they're not asking, hey, I have this problem and I've seen it solved and help me solve it and buy commercial software. The questions are, I think we can do this. I don't know how. And so we're all like, it's problem solving in a very different way. It's not like known solutions. And so I think it's changing maybe the conversation from a transactional, I have this problem, I know I need to buy software, and so help me pick it, to I think there's this emerging capability I want to build. So it's a different conversation, right, which I think is fun for us and also fun for our business partners. And I think it's changing the dialogue between our organizations.
Makes sense. Satya, is that your sense as well?
Yeah, I agree. I think Devin hit the nail on the head. We are for the first time, I feel like technology has no limitations in terms of what it can do. And I think we're also starting to see the role of the CIO change pretty significantly, right? We've always had a good hold on technology that is running the business and moving the business forward. We also have some great folks within IT who can put on their business hat and be very savvy about it. But now this is a time where we can become very relevant or become very irrelevant in terms of how we see it. We start only talking about data governance, right? It becomes very irrelevant. You got to start talking about governance and the value proposition as well. We've got to drive both these engines fast. And I think that's where the secret sauce is. How do you understand this? How do you demystify this to the board, and how do you demystify solutions to the senior members of the executive team? All of that that becomes very, very important. I also feel that now IT also has a great path towards adding to the top line growth of the company, which has always been a pipe dream for many, right? And I think even in a manufacturing organization, you can see IT now adding value through AI. They are adding to the top line growth and to the bottom line growth of the company. Engineering systems are now being significantly changed because of what AI can do. That helps with the productivity of engineers, and that also helps with your products getting out there much faster. And you're now seeing the same thing from manufacturing efficiencies and all of that. So a very interesting time to be as a CIO. I'm sure Devin will agree with me on that. And I think this is only going to get better as we start seeing some of these mainstream use cases come to life. And I think that's where you are going to see that the IT organization is a significant value adder within the business.
Yeah, so let's stay on this. Go ahead, Devin. Yeah.
Can I add, Chris? Satya used the word, he said demystify it. I think that's actually, because AI is putting technology so close to like every human, the things you can do with ChatGPT that you used to have to ask somebody who's very tech savvy how to do, they used to have to code something for you. Because it's like still low code, it is in a really cool way changing like my peers' perspective. It's so embedded in what they're doing. They're like, automatically I have a technology solution I need to solve for, where it used to be like we were behind the wall. Technology used to be like, oh, that thing in the back office. And now they can see it and touch it. And so they're more apt to say, hey, like, let me talk to Devin about how we'd solve this versus it being a purely business problem. So I think it's changing their imagination and how they think about how we work together.
Good. And I want to explore that. We're really going to focus on the role here because, as I mentioned, really at the heart of the State of the CIO survey is the role of the CIO, which has changed dramatically over the 24 years of this survey. So, for example, we see here 82% of CIOs say that the role is becoming primarily digital and innovation focused. 82% say they're leading digital transformation initiatives within their organization. And 81% agree that the CIO is becoming a change maker. And interestingly, we always ask, I think it's 250 line of business executives also fill out this survey because we want their perspective on how they're working with their own CIOs and the effectiveness of the CIO within their organization. Line of business executives agree with these statements. They're really looking at the CIO to be a change maker. So, Devin, let me start with you. Talk overall about how your role has changed and how you expect it to change. I want to talk more about the interactions with the board and line of business and CEO in a second, but really what you're telling your team about their role, what you see your role within the organization. How has it changed and how do you expect it to change?
I think, I used to be able to say, hey, think about how you touch the member to my team. They can so clearly see how they touch our members and everybody in the organization. It's a much clearer line of sight because the technology is literally everywhere. It's not just in the back office, like in the data center anymore. It's literally everywhere. So I think it is exciting for the people inside my team. And I think the other, like so we're obviously fast growing both organically and inorganically.
Right.
And I am in every deal conversation because technology is native to like everything we're doing. So like it's a competitive advantage for everything we're doing, where it used to be sort of like, hey, well, let's talk about the cost structure of IT. And so I think, every organization's different, right? So my CEO and my board's very aggressive about technology, so it makes my job fun. And not every company's like that, but I do think it's just changing. Where it used to be sort of a functional role, it's certainly a strategist, new revenue opportunities, how are we doing growth and things like that. It's a big part of just the broader strategy. It's a line that runs through all things.
I'm glad you used that word strategist. one of the things that we asked the line of business executives is, how would you characterize your CIO? And one of them, and really what we consider to be the ideal role, is business strategist. And this year, that number increased significantly. I mean, it's still under 60% of the line of business folks categorize their CIO that way, but we're seeing good growth in there. So I'm really glad you brought up that strategist term. Satya, how has your role changed, and how do you envision it changing going forward?
So the metamorphosis of the role is pretty fascinating. About in my own experience, right, about 8 years ago, IT was a support function, right, and from a support function, COVID became a catalyst where IT became an enablement engine, where we were trying to help the business run from wherever, however, whatever. So I think that was where IT gained a lot of credibility, right? A lot of leaders who thought IT was a cost center started to look at IT to say, wow, these guys can kind of help us to run the business. Maybe we get them more involved in these conversations. And then post-COVID world, we became more of the drivers, because we were now at the ideating table. And then we were giving our ideas, our views on how we need to shift and focus. We were real solution shapers at that, from that perspective. Again, a lot of credibility earned through the years. And then now, with the advent of AI, we are seen as a visionary organization. How do you guys come and enable us to get there? So you have to kind of show them the utopia of what AI can do. When you talk to a COO, or how do you envision your day? What are you doing when you come in? When you look at your system? What are those things that are on your mind? Do you want to know where are we on these design wins, right? Where are we on these orders? And how are we going to get? Are we attaining our schedule? Are we doing all of that through just natural language? You don't need to log into 15 different systems to get you the answer that you're looking at. So that's the pivot, and that's why I use the term demystifying officers, is because we need to kind of demystify these systems, take away all those 3-letter acronyms of systems that are changing and shifting our world, to saying, what do you want? Ask in natural language. Well, we will get there at some point, but we need to know where we're getting towards, right? And I think that's where you work backwards to say, how do I get them? If I need to know a lot information, how do I get that lot information to the exec in a very simple format, right? And that's where the secret sauce lies. And I can imagine how this role of the CIO is going to change over a period of time. I like the term strategist, right? And I think that's and Devin is right. And I think we are seen more as people who understand the business and technology, and how do we bring that to the business, and how do we build the value over a period of time.
Yeah, Satya, I have to say that we did CIO.com. We did several surveys during the pandemic and post-pandemic, and you're right, remarkable change in the perception of the CIO role as someone who enabled the company to either thrive or survive during that difficult period. And I think AI is having that same kind of effect of driving those conversations, enabling those conversations. But let's talk about those conversations. Talk about how your relationships with the CEO, the board, and business peers have changed. And I know I'm going to ask you about this, Zach, because you talk again with all of the members of the CEC. How do you see those relationships changing?
Yeah, well, first I'll just step back and I think you feel it here, and we feel it within the council. The energy level among the CIOs we work with is very high. Their profile within their organization is on the rise, and they know they have the opportunity to impact the business in meaningful ways. And that lends itself to the time that they're spending with the board and within the C-suite, really helping to develop strategy that's driving the companies forward. So we see and feel it every day as we visit with CIOs. A lot's being asked of them, but it's an opportunity to really bring their expertise forward and have an impact on the business.
Yeah, and then Satya, what's your take on that? How are these discussions and relationships changing?
Yeah, I think as Zach mentioned, it's the energy level is high for different members of our own executive team too, as they look at this and they're trying to understand what can we do, how can we use it in my own line of business. we are trying to think about very innovative ways of doing it. The age of those low-hanging fruits that came with AI are all taken now. Everybody wanted to take advantage of how do we generate code, and how do we use Copilot or something to kind of write our emails. How do we all of that is gone, right? We've all taken advantage of all that, but now it comes down to the real meat of it to say, how do we make our process much more faster, much more optimal? Can we look at it in a variety of different functions?
Right.
And I think just being involved in those discussions, just being asked to be at the ideating table, whether it is at the highest level or whether it is within the individual functions, is where it really warms our heart to see how much the fabric of IT is kind of intertwined with many different functions of the business. And I think, but we've got to be very careful. We can't boil the ocean, right? We need to understand the prioritization of it, the democratization of data, the democratization of analytics, and now the democratization of AI is coming to the fore. Devon mentioned about getting the rise of data scientists and the citizen development that's happening, and I think IT has to be very careful about building governance models that is going to help make these processes faster. So I think there's a lot of pull in different areas. It's always great to be wanted, but I think you have to deliver in order for that to be a very fruitful relationship.
To continue and build on. And Devon, I want to get your take on something that you said struck me. You talked about there's an educational component of this, like particularly around AI. And I've heard this from other CIOs where they have, line of business coming saying, do we have an AI or can you get us an AI? And, there's a lot of education that they're having to do around not only AI, but around risk and security and other things. So how are your conversations with CEO, board, line of business peers? How are they changing?
Well, I think one of the things I embraced a few years ago, even kind of pre-COVID, was when I introduced myself, I say, first of all, hey, I've been in managed care for 23 years. I happen to have been playing an IT role those whole 23 years. So I think you have to really know the business you're in. And then luckily, I happen to really and deeply understand technology, like it's just a bonus. I think you have to come at it from that lens, because if you start with technology first, it's like a mystifying language. Like, so Satya was saying, like, how do you demystify all this? It needs to be in natural business terms. We talk a lot about, these acronyms and technology, and even the sort of like all the different types of AI, generative machine learning, all these different things, even GoFi, all these things. It can be very confusing, and you have to simplify it because it's very accessible. And so I try to just say, hey, first, let's talk about the business and what the business problem. And then, oh, by the way, I'll explain this in the back if you want. I'll draw a picture for you if you want, but let's talk about the business problem. And so I think you have to keep it there. You can get, like with any technology, you can get really in the weeds. And when you're talking to a CEO and a board, they trust that Satya and I know how to do this. That's not their job, but what can you do in the possibility? I think you got to keep it there. So you got to know the business really well. So you have to have credibility in the business you're in. Yeah. And then also deeply know technology. In the same way, like my CFO deeply knows the business we're in, and he's really good at actuary and financials, right? That's where he spent his whole career. So
one of the themes that's come up in other discussions is this notion of proactivity. So instead of waiting to be asked, what can you do? It's also bringing ideas to the table and bringing solutions in advance, which really requires, as you say, knowing the business and knowing the market and the wider economy. So for the first time this year in our State of the CIO survey, we asked some questions about stress and burnout and job satisfaction. So I just want to run quickly through some of the findings of that. When we asked about CIO burnout, like how burned out do you feel in your job? We had a significant number, over almost a third of the respondents, who were in the very high ranges of that. On a scale of 10, they were 8, 9s, or 10s. So then when we asked about their stress level in that same category of 8, 9, and 10 on that scale, with 10 being, I am extremely stressed out, which I feel in a lot of my life, but separate. We had even more people. We had close to 40% of the respondents were in those highest levels of that. And what was more concerning, when we asked line of business executives, what's the impact of that? We had 67% of them, 2/3 of them, saying that stress has either somewhat hindered progress, meaning missed deadlines or project failures, or significantly hindered the success of projects or meeting deadlines. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with you, Devin. Do these numbers surprise you? These stress and burnout numbers?
A little bit, maybe not so much. And I think there's also the correlate. There's another question in there about like, and sorry to skip ahead, but like, do you love your job? And everyone said yes. That was even more interesting, right?
Yeah, I was going to get to that too, but you can tackle that right away. It's sort of, and I'll show our audience. You can see again on that 8, 9, and 10 scale, we really had, close to 50% of respondents said, "I love my job." So how do these things sync up?
I don't know. No, for me, I think one of the things, maybe it's this pivot from like functional expert to strategist. I think IT is really complicated. Everything from like end user compute, the software on the network, that everything is running in technology. So the expansiveness of the job and the disciplines under IT is just ever expanding. And then within that, everything, including the network, the data center, everything is evolving at like a quarterly pace. Like it used to be, hey, I'd upgrade something in a 18, 24-month cycle. I mean, Microsoft Teams is patching and doing feature points at like every other week. I mean, the pace of the acceleration of it. So it's like the moment you believe you're expert in it, you're actually already antiquated. You have to learn something new. And so then I think maybe many of us, as having had been sort of in that control functional role, pivoting to this role where like your honest answer has to be, I actually have no idea how that's going to work, but I'm going to figure it out. Maybe that's an uncomfortable transition. And I think it requires a lot of resilience. It requires a lot of risk taking, and sort of like how do you create an environment around yourself, with your team, with your peers, of curiosity and questioning instead of perfection, because there's no version of that anymore. I mean, the pace of the technology and every component of the technology is at lightning fast speed. So I'm wondering if it's just that pivot of like the expectation of being expert. Systems all have to be up and available 100% of the time. Like there's no more 99. It's 5 nines for everybody, for all things. And then the pacing of it, the modernization, the security, and everything on top of it. So I'm just wondering if it's that tension point between the two of that expert and then becoming strategist means you're not expert. There's no such thing as expertise because you're going into new worlds that don't even exist.
Yeah. And Satya, what's your take on this stress level, this burnout level? Does this surprise you? Especially concerning, I think, is the line of business responses, that it's having an effect on the performance.
No, I think Devin hit all the keynotes there. It is a very interesting time, but it's also a time where we've got to pace ourselves. And I think we need to understand, I think AI is a part of that equation. AI might be the catalyst in that, but then you've got to think about it holistically. Devin mentioned about looking at our data centers, looking at our cloud portfolio, looking at our network, because if you go, it's like you have a Ferrari. You need to make sure you need to put the right roads to kind of get us there. You need to put the right guardrails so this doesn't crash. You need to know how to drive this car. You need to make sure that the car is taken care of. There's so many other things that we need to understand, because again, when we talk about AI, we talk about data, we talk about the systems, and we also have to operate the 3-speed architecture, right?
Yeah.
There is IT operations, the day-to-day operations, and then there is the modernization of our applications, of our systems, which is a continuous process. Just a few years ago, we used to talk about technical debt, and now nobody talks about technical debt. Everybody talks about AI. We still have to address the technical debt, because
we're going to talk
in the
more
age
about
of AI,
this.
In the age of AI, garbage in is garbage out squared, right? So we need to make sure that we have a good path to making sure that our systems are good, clean, the data is sanitized, there is a single source of truth. And then when we go to the data layer, how do you harness this data, the knowledge graph around all of that? And then you start talking about data. Now there is agentic AI models coming out there. And so we need to think about the interoperability of these agentic models, and then you have to think about the business layer to say what works for us. So we have to pace ourselves, right? I heard that there are about 30,000 startups in AI. We've got to start thinking about not making everything ourselves. Have to start looking at what's available out there. We don't have to reinvent the engine. We can be the ones that are using those to where it should be. So I think it's about pacing ourselves, and there is definitely a feeling of burnout. And I think no matter what you do, the finish line seems to be going forward a few more steps. So I think that's where it is something that we'll have to understand, we'll have to learn, and maybe Devin will agree. All of us will have to start becoming more healthier, get our yearly physical checkups, and make sure that we are there for the long haul.
Well, I have to say, you two seem very happy in your job, so I'm glad. But it really strikes me. And again, Devin, I just touch back in terms of stressed out, burned out, love my job.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert on psychology. I do think it to run an organization and to be part of a C-suite it's stressful. Those jobs they're burner, right? They're burner jobs. So self-care, giving yourself some grace, taking your health. I think the other thing, and I'm not an expert in this, but I was thinking a lot about this coming into this interview. There's some military studies that said stress really, so they equate stress to lonely.
Yeah.
And so so how do we create communities in our teams at a C-suite level? How do you create a community? Because when you're stressed out, you just feel like you're isolated, right? That's what that feels like. You're alone. You don't know how to solve the problem. So I deeply believe in sort of community and culture, and both at a CIO peer level, but within the companies we're in. And I don't know, just be nice. Just be nice to each other too.
Well, that's a great jumping off point. I wanted to talk to you about that. Within the survey, we asked, you have lots of goals. There's lots of things as a CIO you want to achieve and you want your team to achieve. But we ask, what's holding you back from being able to achieve those goals? Variety of things, but the number one answer is staff and skills shortages. And we have seen this in a variety of surveys, whether it comes to AI, security, cloud, the changing nature of the staff, the skills we don't have in order to move these kinds of initiatives forward, the challenge of keeping good people. So let's talk about these issues. And Devin, I'll start with you because you brought this up. How are you managing the challenge of finding, training, keeping people, not just the roles that you already have, but all the roles you're going to need for these new initiatives like AI, like Edge, IoT, pick your cool new thing going forward?
It's probably the people side and the culture and the talent is probably the thing I spend my most time on.
Yeah.
Like Satya, I'm competing for talent at a national level and a global level even. And I'm competing against $100 billion companies
right.
For the best talent. So you have to be a place where people are dying to work for you and feel like they have opportunity and career growth and that it's fun, right? So there's, it's a big deal. And I think going back correlation to the stress part, when I'm super stressed out, I'm not a lot of fun to be around. I don't really create a good energy in the organization. So I think that like as a leader, as the top leader in the IT organization, as we compete for talent, that ripple of your vibe or feeling of the stress or happiness or whatever it is, or optimism flows through the organization. So I think it's really spending time at an individual level, like what are your people feeling when they're around you? And it changes the shape of the team and the dynamic, and whether people are willing to take risks or not, right? If they feel like they're going to be penalized or whatever, it's a tough place to have innovation.
And Devin, I want to press you on this. So when you talk about culture, what is it you do specifically that makes this culture that you value so much?
Oh, it's a lot of things. So I talk to my people. I do roundtables all the time. I talk to people.
Right.
I try to just like model like what it is to be nice and kind and like be good to people. We spend a lot of time on what do we expect people to do and be, and how do we expect them to be innovative. And we're kind of relentless on we use the concept, it's a little controversial, of talent density. What do we really think about who's our very best talent? It's a constant conversation of communication and teaching, and it's like in everything we do. And I expect my staff, and we kind of have a no blip role, but we don't let bad people in, and you can't make that, and you got to have to hold the line.
Oh, now I know what the blip is. I just figured it took me a little bit to figure it out, but now I know what it is. Yeah. Satya, how are you managing this? This comes up in every survey we do.
I think it's, from a culture perspective, it's all about trying to instill what's in it for my team members, right? What's in it for them before what's in it for the organization, the bigger picture. Again, working on some very cool technologies, working on technologies that is having a direct impact on our business is a huge thing, right? I think it's the folks that are doing this are actually going to see the impact of what they did, and I think seeing that is hugely inspirational.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the role lies in trying to tell them to say, you got a front seat, drive this towards where it should be, and you will see the impact of what you're trying to do as well. So sometimes I feel that the I in the CIO stands for inspiration, to make sure that we are the ones that are trying to kind of help the organization see what it is. And I think it's also about coming back to the other question, which is what are we trying to do to make sure that we have the talent? That's definitely a huge challenge, right? Some of the reasons why there is stress and burnout is also because of the talent that we have been thinking about. How do we bring the right talent? Because I don't want IT to become the choke point for the business. We don't want to be strong-arming the business strategy. We want to be doing everything that we can to kind of keep this thing going, which means there's going to be a lot of resources that is going to be required to kind of drive this forward. And I think, how do we get those resources? And that's where you start looking at the entire ecosystem. Where can you co-develop with your vendor partners? Can you co-develop with your customers? Can you co-develop? Obviously, within the organization, can we create an entrepreneurial ventures? What can we do to kind of spur all of that so that we can keep this juggernaut rolling rather than stalling? Is where we spend a lot of time. And how do you reskill? How do you retrain? And how do you keep the employees that you've reskilled and retrained too? So it's a concoction of many different things that has to come together, and successful CIOs do that. One last thing I'll talk about is that IT is also looking at the paradigm change in which we are operating, right? I think we have to start looking at certain areas of IT which is adding value, which is making us more competitive, and looking at certain areas of IT which is basically commodity. Everybody does that, right? Everybody manages backups, but we can be thinking about that as something we need to start thinking about giving it to somebody who can do it better, and start focusing on areas which is going to add more competitive or more make us more competitive in the business place. And I think that's where we have to start thinking about talent holistically.
Right, that makes sense. I do think you have a line of T-shirts and coffee mugs with Chief Inspiration Officer.
I love that.
On them. I think you can own them. You might want to trademark that before we get off. Zach, I'd love to hear about what you hear from the CEC about this issue of staffing, and then I'll get your take. But I also want to hear from Devin and Satya about it. How do you think AI is going to change that? So AI has uses within IT as well. So first, what are you hearing from CEC members about staffing overall?
CEC members definitely concur that staffing is at or near the top of the list in terms of the challenge that they're faced with. We spend a lot of time as a council trying to brainstorm and share best practices around how to overcome some of those challenges. On the AI side of the equation, interestingly, as we look at the AI use cases that have been most successful in the past year within the council, there's been numerous use cases shared where our members have leaned into AI to automate tasks, and really have done so not only within IT, but across lines of business to help address the shortage of talent that's out there by being able to free up time of their current staff who maybe is in a great position to focus on innovation and allow them to focus on those higher value activities versus the tasks.
Makes sense. And Satya, we're coming up on our time pretty quickly. We have about 10 minutes left. I do want to get a quick take from you and from Devin on how do you see AI changing the game and how your team works? We talk about it a lot about the rest of the business, but how's it changing IT?
Yeah, I think we will get more and more into an AI-driven process or into an AI-driven process. I think we've got to start. We got to stop thinking about the silos within the IT organization and start looking at AI as something that's going to unify things. Even running the IT organization is going to involve a lot of AI to kind of do this, especially in the service management space. I think we are starting to understand, acknowledge that generating code is something that we've kind of embraced well. That was a good test to see if AI are also people who can accept changes and embrace change. I think this is something we've got to start thinking a whole lot more. How do we simplify systems, right? Those are also very important for my team members to understand this. If we are going to be driving this within the organization, we better start living that day in and day out, and that's going to be how I see this moving forward.
Makes sense. Devin, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine a new world where everybody in every organization is a technologist, meaning like I just spent time with a founder who's building, you can build apps and websites and APIs with drag and drop. You should be able to do that. I mean, I need to give my business partners a platform that's secure and stable, and there's a promotion path for testing and things like that. But why don't they manage their own business rules? I don't ever want to write a report again. Those things run a job. So I think one of the beauties of AI is it puts technology in the hands of everyone. You don't have to be a deep technology expert. And then what the technology people, their imagination run wild because they aren't consumed with things like back-end jobs and backups and things like that. They can do really creative stuff. So I just think makes technology more pervasive and makes everyone in tech. Everybody should be in IT.
Yeah, empower everyone. So we don't have much time, and I have two big topics that I want to ask you both about. It's sort of unfair to tackle these big topics in a short period of time. But when we ask CIOs, what I mentioned earlier, the slide where we ask them what they're focusing on today, one of the big areas is this issue of modernizing infrastructure and applications. And to that, I would add modernizing the way we develop applications and modernizing security. So how are you wrestling with that? You talked about technical debt, Satya, and I'll start with you. This is a huge thing, and it's behind the scenes, and it's tough to get funding for, and it's tough to get people excited about. How are you navigating modernization and getting past that technical debt?
I think again, it comes down to kind of explaining the whole enchilada in terms of saying AI, data, systems, processes. So we have to get them the whole picture there and kind of walk them through the whole process too. And I'll tell you one area where technology is breaking silos within the business, right? Because when we look at the single source of truth, for example, when you talk about cost models, you're going to say, okay, where is the data for my cost model coming from? You ask the business, and each one has a different area from where they are pulling their cost models. And that's where you're saying, well, I need to start thinking about my data lake. And for my data lake, I need to populate that with the single source of truth. So let's get together, let's have the discussion, let's think about the process, let's harmonize that and look at that single source of truth. So that's where you see that discussion coming towards that. And then when you identify that there are gaps which is a cause of a technical debt, you start fixing those. And then when you fix those, that has a direct impact on the results that you will see on your AI processes or AI systems. So I think you've got to kind of walk them through the entire journey to make sure that there's a lot of importance in investing in the right systems and building or harmonizing the processes as you go through the process, which will reflect in your data. And I will mention this again, garbage in is garbage out squared. So keep that in mind when you start thinking about AI and data.
Yeah, I think there's another coffee mug and T-shirt in that garbage in, garbage out square.
I have so many of these I have to
you've got something going on here. Devin, how are you tackling this issue of modernization in terms of what's working for you? What advice do you have for others?
We've instituted for a very long time, and even in my prior roles, a very structured N-1, and all the way up to the board of directors. And when I say everything's N-1, or as much as it can be, right, without disrupting the business, I think it's really hard. It's like having a car and you choose not to change the tires and you keep driving. At some point, it's going to break, and that catch up when that tire blows, and then you have to replace not just the tire but the rim and then the whole chassis. The expense of that. So storytelling to your board and your CFO to make sure that funding is always available. And it's not a discretionary topic, because once you get behind the curve, and I think this is even true, especially on the emergence of AI, those companies that can stay modern and stable, if you're replacing like your integration framework or even a mainframe, AI doesn't run on a mainframe. It doesn't run. Like you can't. So like you're starting to make these like very difficult choices. But if you get behind, it's tricky to catch up. So I just think every CIO has got to convince your board, CFO, CEO, you have to have an N-1 kind of a strategy where it's just part of your day to day. It's like taking out the trash. Yeah.
I talked to one CIO who said, just tell them that it's out of security and it has to be fixed because it's
you could do that too. Yeah.
a security problem. And again, I apologize because this is a big topic, but I think, and it's not mentioned specifically in the survey, but I think it's so important right now. In a meeting with another group of CIOs, one of them said, one of the challenges that we have is the world that we're in right now is the world order that we all grew up in is dissolving. We have wars in the Middle East, wars in Europe, global tensions. We've got just so much change, and things that we took for granted 3, 5, 7 years ago are different these days. Even a new administration here, there'll be changes associated with that. How are you as CIOs helping your organizations navigate this world of rapid change, rapid uncertainty, where it's different than it was just a few short years ago? Devin, let me start with you, and we'll wrap up with Satya on this.
Yeah, I think it's hard. Like, you got to pay attention to what's actually happening. There's a lot going on in the world. And then you have to, for me, I try to step back and say, well, where are we globally? I mean, because these amazing things are still happening. So every human protein, because of generative AI, is now mapped. And the ability to solve diseases, literally give immunization, it's at a pace and our imagination, the things we can do with medicine alone, just because of AI, are astounding and will change the course of history and humanity. So yes, I mean, humans are still humans. We all do some silly stuff, and I think we'll continue to do that stuff. I do think the possibility of humanity is still on a positive trend, and I think it's our obligation, particularly as leaders of technology, to do good with what we have and the accountability we have and the roles we play is to do good with the technology.
Well,
I tend to be optimistic.
You are very optimistic. And just let me ask, in terms of philosophy, I know in the past it was all about speed and moving forward quickly. Have we shifted away from speed to resiliency?
No, I think it's an and, like, it's just a pile on. It's a little bit, and that's the thing when you get down to the stress level. Everything is additive. You cannot slow down. And that's right. I mean, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Satya, what's your take on this? It's a new world, changing world.
So my 1 minute spiel on this. Yeah, my 1 minute spiel on this is that I think we've got to give the business the agility that it needs. We got to be lean and nimble. Our systems have got to be more resilient because of the fact that there's so much uncertainty. Things could change within a span of hours, days these days.
Right.
I think as the business depends more and more on technology, more and more on tools to kind of drive everything, we've got to start thinking about resiliency within the IT organization as something that's for the organization as something that is paramount. If you think about what would happen if some parts of our systems don't work today, it could be catastrophic, and it could affect our revenues, could affect operations. So we've got, when we think of new technologies, we've got to think resiliency also as a part of that. And that's one of the reasons why within my own organization, I have resiliency as one of those functions that's constantly thinking about, what are you doing for this? If you're going to be building a new AI model, if this doesn't work, what happens? What's the alternate? We've got to start thinking about that. And because there's so much happening, so much uncertainty, so much dependency, we are dependent on our partners, and our partners are dependent on so many other partners. So we are in a huge supply chain based model that is going to run all that. So definitely think about agility, being lean, nimble. How do we make sure that we continue to survive and we continue to thrive when some catastrophe hits us? I think that's very important.
You know, in advance of this discussion, I told folks that it was going to be a great conversation with some really smart people. It's a great part of my job is that I get to talk to people who are a lot smarter than me. But today I was right. It was a great conversation with some really smart people, and I'm really pleased to have been a part of it. Thank you so much. Thanks, Satya, Devin, Zach. Great insights, terrific conversation. I also want to thank my colleagues behind the scenes, Holly McWalter of Foundry and Robin Clausen of the CEC, for making this research and discussion happen. They were invaluable in driving this forward. I had the easy part. They did a lot of the legwork and a lot of the leading up to the research and preparation. So thanks very much to them. I also want to thank our video team, great group of people to work with who always make these things come off smoothly. Most of all, thank you all for joining and making time for us today. Whenever you're watching this, hope you found it valuable. Hope you found the information useful. For CIO.com, I'm John Gallant.